Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Brandon here for RC Nightmare. This is our third and final video for our Mugen MBX6-T. Previous videos we installed electric conversion. I showed you how to install some of the equipment. Last video I programmed our radio to our receiver and set up the steering. In this video we're going to be setting up our Tekin system, specifically soldering our speed controller to the motor, getting our connectors on board, installing it on the vehicle, and then going through programming. So first thing we're going to do is soldering. I'm going to whip right through this. We've got previous videos showing you how to do detailed soldering, but I'll just go through the basics for you. So let's get started. Okay guys, first thing we want to do is check the layout of our wires before we go cutting anything. I've already laid out my speed controller where I want it. I have one of my phase wires for the motor. I've just checked the length to make sure it's kind of the appropriate length. I've pre-tinned all these, so you can see I have these three phase wires pre-cut and tinned on both ends. You want to flow solder into the open ends of the wire. And then I have my power in connect wires ready to go too. So these are going to be nice and short. Going to go right here. I'm going to put a DIN on the end of there. My battery pack's real close, so these can be extremely short. I don't need to lengthen those too much. And I've made sure that my signal wire reaches too. It's going to go from here over to here, no problem. So you want to just verify the layout before you go soldering something on and not giving yourself enough slack. This one's good to go, so we're going to continue on the soldering. Okay guys, next step, I'm going to solder the DINs onto my power wires. Because these wires are so short, I don't want to solder them onto the RX8 first. I'll kind of be fighting the unit as I'm trying to get them onto the DINs. So I've already pre-tinned the end of my wires here. I've got the tabs on the DINs pre-tinned. Because I'm dealing with open-end wires here, I'm not going to have to worry about shrink tubing just yet. Let me tin the tip of the soldering iron. Again, we're just going to apply the heat until the solder flows all the way through the DINs, like so. Let me spin this a little bit so I can get to the positive one. Same thing here, pre-tin the tab on the DINs, make sure your wire is pre-tinned. I got a little solder on the tip of my iron here, and we're going to just hold heat until the solder flows all the way through. Like so. Double check that, put the shrink tubing over, and we'll move on to the RX8. Alright guys, next step is to solder all our wires onto the convenient solder post the RX8 uses. So the posts are really convenient because you can reuse them. You can apply heat to it, not worry too much about getting down into the circuit board and damaging stuff. They're nice and tall. Very good solid connection. We just want to make sure that we pre-tin them first. So to do that, again, clean your tip off, put a little solder onto it. And we're just going to flow a little bit of solder into each of these slots here. Doesn't take much. We're going to be reflowing them once we get the wires in there, so we just want enough to make a nice good connection. You don't need to fill them up. Like so. So I just want to give you guys a little bit of a close-up so you can see how I pre-tin these posts. You want to make sure the solder is flowing on both sides and the bottom. You don't need to fill them up or have the solder overflowing, but just enough that you know the solder's already made a good connection to the post, and by the time we get the wire in there, there'll be more than enough. Okay, now we're ready to solder all our wires onto the post. I got the wires pre-tinned. I flattened out the end of these wires a little bit so they slide into the posts really well. You can see that I got the end squared off there. I just take a pliers and pinch it. Now I can lay these in. Because I have these pre-tinned so well, really all we have to do, put a little solder on the tip of your soldering iron, slide it in the post there, and just hold the heat on until the solder flows all the way through to the bottom. And you'll see it. You just want to keep an eye on it and wait for the solder to melt all the way through. When you got a good connection, let go, let it solidify, and there you have it. I'm going to do the rest of these off camera. But there's a nice close-up shot of what it should look like. You got a nice clean joint. Okay, I got these all soldered on. Now you can see the correct order. You want to take note as you're soldering these to make sure you are putting them in the right order. On the very base of the soldering post, they have little letters. Your A, B, C, positive, negative, too, for the input. So we just want to make sure we match A, B, and C up to the motor in that order. It's very important that you do that. And obviously very important that you get the negative and positive wires in the right post. There you have it. Now we can focus on soldering this onto the motor. Alright guys, I got my motor tabs pre-tinned. I give you a shot of that there. You can see you just want a little pool of solder on there. And then it's very important that we follow the order of these phase wires for a sensored motor, so you can see right next to the tabs it says A, B, and C. Try to give you a close-up of that. We want to make sure that we match those to the speed controller wires as well, otherwise you could short out your motor pretty quickly. So we take our controller and make sure that we're starting with the same order. This is my C wire, and it's the same story here as with the D's and everything else. Clean the soldering iron tip, pre-tin it a little bit, get a little bit of solder on there. Lay the wire over just like you like it, apply heat until it flows all the way through. When you see it flow to the bottom, just let it solidify, and there you have it. I'll do the rest off camera. Alright guys, I got my 3-phase wire soldered onto the motor, paying very close attention to the order. You can see what the solder joint looks like. Just the right amount of solder. You don't want too much that it's falling over the edges. You don't want too little that you can't see it. You want just like that. It should be nice and clean and shiny like that. No dirt, debris, or foreign matter burned black into it. So we know we got a good solid connection. Now we can mount the speed controller and run the signal. Okay guys, you can see that I've mounted my speed controller to my ESC plate. I've mounted my switch, my power switch, in a safe spot where I can get to it. Now all that's left is to mount this whole ESC tray and our battery tray to the chassis and run our wiring. You can see in the MBX6-T they have a really convenient way to run the wire underneath the tray out of harm's way. It comes out right down here, and then it's going to run underneath our differential. They actually have a special slot right in there for it. You can bolt this in, run that wire, and we'll finish up this install. Alright guys, you can see that I have my Tekin ESC completely installed. I installed the fan on top of it, and we got that plugged in. I ran the signal harness, that's plugged in. I got it secured here so it's not flopping in the wind. And I ran the signal wire for the speed controller into the receiver box. You can see it running underneath the center differential there. So we have everything pretty much laid out. All that's left is to program the Tekin. I'm going to run you through that now. Okay guys, the very first thing we're going to want to do is calibrate the speed controller to a radio. So I already have the speed controller hooked up to a receiver, and I have my transmitter turned on. To get this ESC into programming mode, we're going to hold this mode button down for 3 seconds as we turn the unit on. So I'm going to hold mode down, turn the switch on, wait for the lights to come on. Now it's looking for neutral. I'm not touching the transmitter. It found neutral. Now I want to hold full throttle. And there it verified full throttle. And now we want to hold full brake. And it found full brake. Now we know the speed control is calibrated to our radio. We can move on to the next programming option. Okay guys, the rest of this programming can be done through the Tekin Hotlink via your laptop, but if you're out somewhere without a laptop or you just rather do it through the speed controller, the beauty of these Tekin speed controllers are they have all these lights here with abbreviations for all the programming options that they include. So I'm going to run you through those real quick. All the quick tune modes you can work with are drag brake adjust, brake reverse strength, current limiter, neutral width, throttle profiles, motor type, and voltage cutoff. Now from the factory there's no drag brake. This is what I want. The reverse brake strength is about half. That's what I want as well. There's no current limiter. That's good. Neutral width is about halfway. That's what I like. Throttle profile is linear. I'm going to start with that. Motor type is brushless, and there is a no voltage cutoff, and that's the one I'm going to change, is the voltage cutoff. We're going to be running a 5-cell LiPo, so we're going to have to turn on the 5-cell LiPo cutoff. You'll be very careful when you're running these Tekins from the factory that they don't have a cutoff, so if you're running it without any programming, you could ruin your LiPo. Now to get into programming mode, we're going to have our transmitter turned off for this. Now if your transmitter doesn't have a failsafe, and as you do this your servo's kind of maxing out one way, it might be a good idea to unplug your servo to prevent damage. So what we do to get into programming mode is hold down motor increment button as we turn on the switch. As soon as we turn on the switch we can let go. We can see the lights sweep up and down, and we're starting on the very first thing, that's drag brake, and we're going to move all the way over to voltage cutoff. Now our voltage cutoff, we can hit the increment button and we can change the increments. So that's a single, 2, 3, 4, 5. We got a 5-cell cutoff, and that's what I want. So I'm going to hit mode to save that, and now we're back to the beginning. So I can turn this off, and to verify my setting, I'm going to do the same thing. Press mode, turn it on, let it go through. I'm going to hit mode until I get to voltage cutoff. and you can see that it did save my setting of 5 cells, so we know that we're all set there. We can turn that off, and that's really about it. Now we're all set up. You do want to verify that things are moving in the right direction, that your motor is spinning in the right direction. Check all those little nitty-gritty things. You do want to check your fail-safe. You want to turn on your radio, turn on your speed controller. This thing is ready, and I'm going to turn off my radio. You want to make sure that as I turn it off and we go into fail-safe, that's where I'm at right now, that it stays at neutral, and it does. You want to make sure it doesn't apply throttle or brake, otherwise you might have a runaway vehicle. If it doesn't, you might want to rebind your setup after you've calibrated, but this one's in good shape, so we just want to double check that. Well, there you have it, guys. Our MBX6-T is ready to run. Really, the only thing I might change in the future, if we want to run this Savox brushless servo at its high voltage rating, we might apply a separate receiver pack or receiver power to this. And if we do that, we remove the red wire from our speed controller plug to the receiver. There's 2 ways you can do that. You can run a BEC that applies a higher voltage, or in our case, we could tap right into our balance plug on our 5-cell pack that we're going to run into to get the desired voltage. Now, this servo can run a 2-cell LiPo right into it, so can our receiver, so I could do that no problem without actually running a BEC. And some people might say, well, you're going to unbalance those few cells that you're tapping off of. And that's true to a point. It's such a small value that I'm not too concerned about it. I know that my balancer on my charger can handle that imbalance, and I know that there's enough capacity. I'm not going to be drawing that much that it would damage the pack during running it. So there's 2 different ways we can do it. For now, we're going to run it as is. There'll be plenty of speed and torque on that servo, but later on we might show you guys different ways to tap in for higher voltages if your system can handle it. So you got to make sure your receiver and your servo can handle that kind of higher voltage. These 2 absolutely can. So there you have it, guys. I appreciate you watching these videos. If you like what you see, check out our website. It's rcnightmare.com. If you have any comments or questions, please put them on down below. And if you have anything that you need to sell, RC related or buy, check out buyrcstuff.com. It's exactly like eBay. It looks the same, it functions the same, it uses PayPal, except it's much, much cheaper. It's like $1 to list something. So check it out, buyrcstuff.com. Might need to get rid of a few things, free up some cash for cool toys like this. So thanks for watching this video, guys. We'll see you soon.